this topic for us. So Laura, again, thanks so much for giving us your time. Let's just start with some baseline information on osteopenia, osteoporosis, and kind of sort of the lay of the land, and then we can move into what Osteoboost does.
Yeah. A couple slides I might bounce around between them to draw from. But just to start, this is, you know, what happens with our bones over the lifespan on average. So this is the mean bone density for women. There are differences by race. So Asians and Caucasians have lower bone density than Blacks. But these are still means. So, if you have below average and half of the population is below average, right, you will have even lower bone density. So our bone density peaks typically in our 30s, then declines for women. There's typically rapid bone loss in the 5 years around menopause, and then you still lose, but kind of at a slower rate. And people ask me about men. So men, they essentially have a similar curve, but they have more bone. So the whole curve is notched up a little bit, and then the decline is more even. So men also get osteoporosis and osteopenia. They tend to get it later. But, if you're in the 10th or 15th percentile as a man, you can get osteopenia and osteoporosis young. And, we have patients and actually have investors who are men. The numbers are staggering. So 52 million Americans have osteopenia, which means they have almost triple the fracture risk, and 12 million have osteoporosis. This is a global problem. Japan has the highest rate of osteoporosis in the world. China and India have huge numbers of patients with osteopenia and osteoporosis. And one thing that's interesting is even though the fracture risk is much higher in osteoporosis, there are a lot of fractures in osteopenia. So more than half of all fractures happen in osteopenia. Just very, very quickly, our bone is remodeling. So you have osteoclast activity, osteoblast activity. The clasts take away sort of the older bone, the blasts build bone. And once you get over the mid-30s, the clast activity tends to exceed the blast. But it's sort of this balancing act. And the activities that we do to improve our bone density and bone strength tend to activate one or both sides of this. So the most common category of medications, bisphosphonates, things like Fosamax, slow osteoclast activity. Prolia, the drug that Lisa worked on, essentially almost halts osteoclast activity. And then drugs like Forteo and Tymlos and Avidity try to drive more osteoblast activity, but those tend to be used in more serious cases. And then just, how are people diagnosed? A DEXA scan, which is a very safe and typically inexpensive X-ray, less radiation than a dental X-ray, gives you a reading. As we think about trends, though, there's a lot of many startups using AI to assess bone density from non-DEXA X-rays. So imagine potentially in the future, when you get your dental X-ray, you could be told, oh, and we noticed lower than expected bone density. So that's not here today, but I think it's in our future. And then the T-score, T is essentially a standard deviation away from average. So if you have a -1 T-score, you have one standard deviation below the average for your race-matched, sex-matched 30-year-old. So normal bone is above -1, osteopenia is -1 to -2.49, and osteoporosis is below -2.5. Here's an illustration of that. And if you have a fragility fracture, it's as if you have osteoporosis, even if your bone density is better, because you're fracturing. So a fragility fracture is a fracture that, normal bone would not have sustained. So, you're in a car accident and you break something, that's probably not a fragility fracture, but you just kind of fall forward and fracture your wrist, that could be a fragility fracture. So any questions? I can talk more about this, but I think it seems also like there's a fair amount of knowledge around the table, but any questions on osteoporosis or sort of the traditional sort of treatments?
So, let's say, I know I heard a couple of women saying that they are doing weights to help reverse their osteopenia. Does that show up in the DEXA scan? How do they know that things are improving?
Yeah, okay, I don't have a slide on that, but essentially it's the DEXA scan. And one little fact is you want to get your DEXA scan on the same machine to have as little variability as possible. The DEXA scans do have a fair amount of variability. So typically you'll get one every 2 years. And there's been sort of a trend, Medicare pays for DEXA scans for everyone at 65 and every 2 years. But by 65, you've probably lost a lot of bone. And so more proactive and progressive doctors are doing DEXAs younger. I always encourage people to request one. Like I said, it's safe and typically insurance covers it. And if it doesn't, it should be around $150. It's not a dramatically expensive test. But yes, that is how most people are tracking their progress. There are some like biomarkers in the bone, things like NTX, CTX, P1NP that can be used, but those are just showing kind of trends. Is your osteoblast and osteoclast activity where it should be? But that doesn't give you the actual bone density. So they are used, especially if someone is being treated with medication, but um, not that commonly.
Oh, that's great.
I will say that this is Amy Golden. I will say that I heard that you should get your first one before menopause, so you have a baseline, which is what I did, and then I've been getting it since then. But
I completely agree with that at the
I had to
latest.
ask for it.
Yes, you typically have to ask for it. But the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force just slightly modified their recommendation saying postmenopausal women with risk factors. So the door is sort of opening up. I think it's interesting to, in my like ideal future world, we'd be getting a DEXA, in our 20s or 30s, because, if you go back to this curve,
Yeah.
if you're here, right, then when you decline, you're worse off. So knowing that you're below average, when you're younger, it's much easier to reverse or to build bone. But at the latest at menopause, I completely agree, Amy. And it could affect the, hormone replacement decision, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think this brings up another topic and very interesting, but I want to move on to osteopenia. But just to mention the topic, you mentioned the U.S. Preventive Task Force, and as I've also been talking to a lot of startups and thinking about our healthcare, this is the structural issue we have with a fee for sickness, right? So if you're trying to prevent something, getting reimbursement for that at an earlier age is really hard. They're not, for example, allowing colon cancer screenings for those who are 30 or 35, and we know that the cases are increasing at that age. But anyway, it's a separate topic. I didn't want to get into it, but just kind of raise that issue. Maybe
Yeah.
let's move on to Osteoboost and what your med device does.
Yeah. So a couple more things I just want to say in terms of a transition to what we're doing with Osteoboost is, there was a period of a lot of activity with medical, with drug innovation. So Merck had Fosamax, and then there were other bisphosphonates, Lilly with Forteo, Amgen with two branded drugs. But the adoption of the drugs has been relatively poor. Only about 10% of women with osteoporosis are using drugs. And for reasons that are not completely clear, it's certainly related to the cost of research, but research is expensive in all drug categories. There are no new drugs in clinical trial, or at least no new agents. There's a pill form of teriparatide, Forteo, and no major pharma company has a new program. So it's really interesting that this field that impacts so many people. So as many people have low bone density as have high cholesterol, and maybe some people see it as less serious, but it is important. You know, people can die of hip fractures. Vertebral compression fractures are miserable. The field has kind of been abandoned. I can't help but think the fact that it predominantly affects older women has something to do with it. And by the way, we as women, I think, have a little bit to do with it, because I do see this attitude, oftentimes like in Facebook groups where they'll say something like, well, but losing bone is a normal part of aging. And so therefore, why should I take a drug? And especially if the drug has side effects, serious side effects. And well, yes, that is definitely true. It is a normal part of aging. And, developing, atherosclerosis is a normal part of aging. And cancer is part of aging. And, lots of things are part of aging, and we don't accept them. And we really try to fight against that. So I think it's also important and kind of an attitude shift. And I actually do see that attitude changing. I think this generation of women who have gone through menopause or entering menopause, they are more activated around their health. They're at a stage where they are trying to maintain their health. Amy, I was curious to hear, or interested to hear, that you've been doing strength training. I hear this from a lot of women my age, and we were all into cardio 20 or 30 years ago. And now we realize, like, okay, cardiovascular fitness is important too, but what do we really need also is strength. And that's what helps us stay independent and able to do, the activities. Like, I want to be able to, pick up my grandchildren and hike with them and do all these kinds of activities as I'm getting older. So I think this is an important trend. So just a little bit more about Osteoboost and sort of our considerations. There are a number of pharmacological solutions for osteoporosis, but for the most part, they are not indicated for osteopenia. There are some exceptions to that, but the main reason is that the risk-benefit analysis has not been shown to be such that they're appropriate for osteopenia. Also, many of these drugs can only be used for a few years. So, the bisphosphonates are typically used for 3 to 5 years, and then you need to take a drug holiday. Avidity is used for 1 year. The other anabolics are used for 2 years. Prolia, they're now showing that people can use it for 10 years, but there are some concerns with that. So we don't have the equivalent of a statin that you start in maybe your 40s and you just like use forever, right? We don't have any medicines like that in the osteoporosis field or bone density field. And then if you look at the lifestyle interventions, calcium, vitamin D, they are not enough to reduce fracture risk. The typical exercise that older adults do, walking, biking, swimming, yoga, Pilates, also, it's helpful, but it really doesn't move the needle on bone density. Weightlifting and sort of high impact exercise does help, but most people are unable to do that at the level needed and over, especially as they get older. So there's really a big unmet need for an intervention, a safe early intervention. And essentially that's what we've built. So you know, the key element of the solution, we have a comprehensive solution, is an FDA approved class 2 medical device. It's a prescription device, and it's a wearable. So you wear it 30 minutes a day. It's applying precision vibration to the lumbar spine. The original research on vibration in humans was funded by NASA, where we showed that whole body vibration was able to improve bone density. Essentially, vibration is mimicking exercise on the bones. It's providing a mechanical stimulation to the bones, which is what we know sort of encourages them in a sort of anthropomorphize to improve their strength and density. But the whole body vibration platforms were never able to get an FDA clearance. Their data wasn't consistent enough. And so our innovation is taking that and putting it in a wearable. So the vibrations applied directly to the hips and lumbar spine. The whole body vibration platform data tends to show benefit in the ankle and distal tibia. And, you know, we really need the hips and spine, right, is the most vulnerable anatomy. And then because it's a wearable, we got very good compliance in the trial. And what the data that we showed in the trial was that we reduced the rate of loss of bone by 85% as measured by CT scan. So this was a gold standard randomized controlled trial with a placebo arm and an active arm. And when we measured bone density, we preserved 85% of the bone. And when we look at bone strength, which is a CT measurement, we preserved 83% with excellent statistical significance. Based on this, we got the FDA de novo approval. And I'm super proud of the de novo. There have been only 16 de novos ever approved by the orthopedic section at the FDA, and almost no startups. Most startups will get a 510K. So it was a battle with the FDA and something that I'm proud of. And then we don't stop with the belt. We are building out a comprehensive solution, which also doesn't exist. Take a quick search in the App Store under osteoporosis, and it's pretty slim pickings. It's interesting compared to other health conditions. And so we see a big opportunity for a more comprehensive solution. We have an app to help people be successful with the device, nutrition tracking, and then last July, we acquired an osteoporosis exercise company. So we now have a small Brooklyn office, and that program is designed specifically for patients with low bone density to improve strength and balance and reduce fall risk. So that's our solution. A little bit about where we're at. After we announced the FDA approval, we had over 10,000 patients sign up on a waiting list. We launched a pre-order program to that waiting list, and we sold over $1 million worth of devices last fall. And right now, we started quietly shipping to the pre-order group about 2 weeks ago. So we just started shipping, kind of the first 100 devices or so, and we're kind of gearing up our manufacturing. Everyone always asks me, given the political situation, where we manufacture. We manufacture in Medford, Oregon, thankfully, but we source parts from all over the world, particularly Asia electronics. I think some of our parts, there's nowhere else to get them. So we are impacted, but not dramatically by the tariffs. And we're right now really gearing up on the commercialization side. It is, I mentioned, a prescription product. And so we're seeing prescriptions come in from leading medical centers around the country. I like to do a little show and tell. Somehow the paper version is more interesting. I better turn off my background. You see our fancy office. The endocrinologists have been very excited about our product. This Endocrine Today magazine, which came out last year and went to every endocrinologist, they did this little good vibrations article. And so, yeah, so that kind of drove some interest among endocrinologists, and We're presenting a poster at the next Endocrine Society meeting. We presented our clinical trial results. It was actually this Saturday of our reunion. I guess it was our 35th reunion. Anyhow, so I missed the fun Saturday night party because I got to present my first ever scientific poster. So,
So interesting. Well,
and
you
yeah,
were a glutton for punishment taking chem and biology at whatever 30 years.
Berkeley. Yeah, as an
Yeah,
old
30
lady.
years after graduation. So
I
those
briefly entertained, I was like, maybe I should be a doctor like my parents. And my two oldest sons were already doctors. And then I was like, no, I think it might be too late for that, but I can do something in healthcare. So,
yeah, no, very good. I had a question, and that was you said on your clinical trial you assessed it with a CT scan, but not
right.
DEXA scan. So what's the difference, and why did you
Yeah.
go to that
So
trial?
DEXA scan, the advantage of DEXA is it's very inexpensive and safe, but and uses very little radiation, but you don't have quite as much specificity and sensitivity. So CT is used in clinical trials often because you have this greater um, detail result, right? And so our primary endpoint was CT. If we were to have a primary endpoint of DEXA, the study probably would have had to be 5 times as large. And we didn't have the funding to do it. It would have been great to be able to do that, but the company didn't have the funding. However, we do have DEXA results, and they were all similarly trended. And we did share that in our manuscript, which has been, it's in pre-publication status. So essentially, we saw actually gains in lumbar density, but they were not statistically significant. Interestingly, for the hip DEXA, we showed that we reduced bone loss by about 65%, and the p-value was 0.07. So those people who are, data people know that we kind of just missed being able to claim hip density in our label. And from my point of view, it basically means there's a 93% chance that our results on the hip are valid and are not chance, and 7% chance that 7% probability that they were random chance. And for whatever reason, the scientific world has decided that you have to be 95% to have that claim. So we just missed it, but it's probably working at the hip too. And hot off the presses, we did an analysis of something called HSA that we're going to be writing up a manuscript on, where we showed improvement in the cortical bone thickness and structure in the hip. So sorry, that was kind of a long answer.
No, that's fine. Any questions? Let me just ask the
Laura Brickle and Deborah, I see questions.
Go ahead.
Sure, I'll go first. Thanks. This is fabulous. And I wonder if you took a drug like Fosamax and then you're not taking it anymore, can you do this, if you're back in osteopenia? Like, does it work for later stages? Can you do it at that point?
And Laura, my question was very related to Deborah's, which is if you can share more about your study population as well. And I agree, this is fascinating.
Yeah. Our study population was postmenopausal healthy women with osteopenia. So kind of garden variety postmenopausal bone loss. They didn't have high dose steroids. They didn't have an autoimmune disease. So kind of the very typical postmenopausal bone loss. Specifically to prior use of bisphosphonate, I'd have to double check, but I think our washout was 3 years. So I think we accepted them in the trial if they used bisphosphonates, if they hadn't used them for a few years, and it was either 3 or 5. Now, vibration as a mechanism of action has been studied in men, women, normal bone density, osteopenia, osteoporosis. It's sort of a generally effective mechanism of action. we can claim postmenopausal women with osteopenia. We are seeing physicians prescribe for osteoporosis. About half of our prescriptions are for osteoporosis off-label. Of that group, and this is where I'm speculating, some, maybe half are medication refusers. And I think the other half could be, they've done their 5 years on bisphosphonate and they still have osteoporosis. Or, even the most powerful medications are not a cure. We lack some effect size. So I think we're getting a lot of patients who are on a medication and are using Osteoboost as well. And, there's frankly not much reason not to. There were 0 serious adverse effects in the trial.
And what is the weight of this? Because I'm a
Yeah,
working
it's about,
nomad and moving
yeah,
around.
I'm looking around my office. They're about 3 pounds, and I
Okay.
can try to go grab one. And it looks kind of like a fanny pack. So
Yeah.
here's the
Okay.
picture.
Right.
Yeah, it's a few pounds, and most patients say it feels good, like a massage. It's pretty quiet. You do have to be upright. You can't be sitting, but you could be going for a walk or doing chores in the kitchen, that type of thing. Cara, do you want to?
Yeah, I also
Thank
just want to do a time check. I think
Oh,
we've
yeah, we only have 5 minutes.
5 minutes left. I'm happy to stay on for 5 or 10 minutes longer if Laura can, and I don't know if others can. So
Yeah, I can. And I'll also just say, osteoboost.com, Laura at osteoboost.com. If you have product questions, obviously just feel free
thank
to email me. So,
that's
but
generous.
let's keep going for a few
Yeah.
minutes.
No, so I had like 2 questions. One, can you share a little bit about how was the FDA process to get this this approved? And then, of course, health insurance from my background. So is this covered on their
Yeah.
health insurance? And then is it on their certain medical like conditions and criteria?
So there is coverage through remote therapeutic monitoring for an osteoporosis management program. So we are putting that together, and that will have coverage from Medicare. And we are applying for durable medical equipment status. So that's how we would more broadly be covered. So we don't have coverage yet, but we hope to have it soon. The FDA process was very challenging. We had done a pre-submission and agreed on the endpoints. The FDA tried to walk back some of that, but we were able to get them to stick with the endpoint. There was a fair amount of argument or back and forth over the effect size, because our effect size is less than the drug effect size, but we also have a better safety profile. We didn't have an osteoporosis drug or kind of medical expert reviewing us. There was an orthopedic surgeon, so that was a challenge because they were not really familiar with ongoing management. And so we requested that the FDA involve what's called the Network of Experts. That's a program within FDA where you can request what it sounds like. So we requested that they get input from the American Academy of Clinical Endocrinology, and then that basically got us over the hump. So I did a bunch of escalations, met with the ombudsman. It was difficult. If you had asked me summer, fall of 23, I was not so optimistic, but I wasn't giving up. And it was a fight, but it was one that was really worth it. So, and yeah, and answer the insurance question.
Thank you. Laura. Raquel. You're in mute.
Maybe she stepped away for a second.
Yeah, I know she had to get her kids
I
ready.
had a question in the chat that's
Oh, sorry, I didn't see
yeah,
that.
no worries. And then I have to jump off.
Sorry, this is Laura. I have not walked away. I'm terrible with my phone and this. Quick question. So you're talking about, I'm just interested in your in how much demand you have and how that's how much, you know, you talked about your first 10,000,
Yeah.
quietly starting to ship them. Like, what are you looking at as far as future demand, and when are you going to meet your current number of people who've already requested it?
Yeah. So we're hoping to, ship devices to everyone who pre-ordered pretty soon. So we're ramping up. I'm hoping we can sell 5,000 devices this year. That's, I think there's a possibility of more, but it's also, we're just getting started. It's at a stage in our company history where it's very hard to predict. We are fundraising a safe extension. And so I'm actually presenting tomorrow to the global syndication for HBS Angels. The New York group invested, I think, over 300K. So that was really exciting. We did win the HBS, I forgot to mention, this global new venture competition in 21. So that's fun. We've had kind of an HBS connection all along. But to me, it's really about getting the word out. This is such a huge market. There was a question about, do you have to use it? Can you use it episodically? And that we're essentially trying to slow or halt bone loss. And so if you used it for 5 years and you maintain your bones as stable, and then you stop using it, you'll kind of go back to that background normal rate of bone loss unless you do some other intervention. So you'll always be better off. That bone that you kept for 5 years, you have that you wouldn't have had. But then you'll start to go back to whatever your baseline turnover is. And so it's kind of like exercise and nutrition. This needs to be lifelong, but as much as you use it, you're better off than if you hadn't.
So I do have one question, and it is regarding, you've had a couple of entrepreneurial journeys. So tell us, and I've just started mine. So tell us, give us some tips from the top, like how do you approach it in terms of not only the X factors, but as you think about the market, as you think about the business and profitability?
I mean, it's lonely at the top. Startups are very challenging, and when we have market environments like we have now, it's especially true. On the other hand, I really enjoy what I'm doing. I do get a lot of meaning from it. Meetings like this really kind of get me going because it's a reminder that people who I care about having this problem solved, right? And so, so thank you for your enthusiasm, and so that's the other part of startups that I'm enjoying. But I'm working too much. Fortunately, I have the time. Yeah.
Just a lot of so.
But I wouldn't go back to big companies. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. But just like when you had the FDA issue, sort of how did you manage your emotions at that time?
I was mad. I was really mad at that time, to be honest, because I really thought our data and safety and efficacy profile warranted an approval, right? If we didn't, we that would have been how it was. So I was mad. I was mad on behalf of women. I was mad on behalf of patients. And so it just really energized me. And I think I did some of my best work that fall. I look back at this letter I wrote like 2 levels up the FDA, to kind of make our argument. It was a damn good letter. It was one of my better ones, I think. And it was because I really cared, right? And so so yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a roller coaster, but then it was sweet when we got it.
Yeah,
It was really sweet.
sure.
We actually got the approval letter on my 60th birthday, on the day. So it's
better.
either going to be a very good or not very
Yeah,
good day.
Great way to celebrate your birthday.
Yeah, listen, we could go on and talk more. I know you've got a lot of scale up that's coming up. We could talk about global expansion, which you and I talked about in our prep call. But maybe that will live for another day, Laura. But this has been fabulous. Really, I learned a lot. I didn't know much about osteopenia. I don't have a bone density issue, luckily, but I am going back to the place where I got it done and double check my scores.
Yeah.
Now that I
And
know the
Deborah,
numbers.
can you let me know what this event is that you're telling me about? I'd love to be involved.
Oh, on May 22nd, yes, we've got somebody coming in, and they're actually, it's more from the exercise and how to do them, and a little bit for people who don't know about what they can do in
Oh,
their
I'll just look on.
younger
I'll look
years.
Yeah, I'll look on the HBSA website.
Yes, yes. So May 22nd. So it's obviously a great topic, and many people interested in it. And this is geared towards start planning ahead. But you've got a wonderful product for, when you're already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Laura, we're Lillian, she's not on, I don't think, but she and I are also contemplating a sort of a larger event related to women's health. And I don't mean just reproductive health, but cardiovascular, cancer, other conditions that affect women differently than men as well. Stay tuned. It's in the twinkle in the eye phase. So it might take a while to kind of get that organized, but love anybody's help in getting this organized as well. So
Okay. Great.
all right.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you
day,
so
everyone.
much.
Nice
This
to
has
meet
been
you all.
Thanks so much, and good luck.
Yeah,
Thank you.
congrats.
Bye.
Congrats on a great
Congratulations.
achievement.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Take care.